Welcome to the AI at ICPSR, the February 2026 edition, which is a part of ICPSR's Love Data Week and Data Fair. What we're going to talk about today is sort of setting the stage and what we mean by AI and how it's being used in social research from a very high level. Then we'll talk about ICPSR's AI policy and how that affects data use. And then we'll talk about how AI can help ICPSR as an organization do data better. So we'll let you know a couple of projects that we already have underway that make use of AI, and then we'll talk about some future directions. And we hope to save a good amount of time for questions at the end. But again, if you have them at any point during the session, please do put them in the Q&A box. Our presenters for today, and these are just in alphabetical order, are David Arnold, who's a legal research area specialist here at ICPSR, Alap Doshi, who's the director of our Computing and Network Services unit, Jeanette Jackson, the managing editor of the Research Data Ecosystem, which is the project that is helping us update our entire computing infrastructure, and lastly, Joe Saul, who is our data privacy and security officer. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Jeanette.
Thank you, Lynette. I am very happy to be here. We thought it might help to set the stage, starting with the big picture. And what you see here is an image of kind of a hierarchical system. There's no single universally agreed upon definition of artificial intelligence, but broadly speaking, AI refers to technologies that enable computers to simulate aspects of human cognition, reasoning, pattern recognition, prediction, and decision-making. It's helpful to think of AI as not just one tool, but as a family of methods, and to remember that AI is not magic, it's a set of computational techniques. So within the context of AI as a whole, machine learning is a subset, and it's the workhorse. Machine learning systems learn patterns from data rather than relying solely on explicitly programmed rules. Machine learning depends heavily on data quality, labeling, and representativeness, issues that social scientists already understand well. Then within this next bubble, we have deep learning. Deep learning is a subset of machine learning and uses neural networks with many layers. It's particularly powerful for text analysis, image and video analysis, audio and speech data, and large-scale unstructured data sets. Deep learning requires more data and more computing power, and it's not automatically better. It's very context dependent. And then finally, we have generative AI, a specialized category, which is a subset of deep learning. It creates new context-like text, image, or code based on provided input. And like if you Google, what is ChatGPT, it will tell you that it's actually all of these things. So it's clear as mud sometimes. Critical note, generative AI predicts plausible outputs. It does not know facts, so validation remains essential. And shared concerns across all of these levels, regardless of category, are data bias and representativeness, the need for documentation and metadata, how to ensure transparency and reproducibility in the research process, ethical use and downstream impacts, governance and accountability. And social scientists are particularly well positioned to interrogate these dimensions. And if we could move to the next slide. So this diagram, it was put together following a workshop sponsored by the Institute for Social Research on the use of AI across the social science data lifecycle in the fall of 2025. It was the fall of 2025. Things have changed since then, so just a note, this is a snapshot in time. The big picture is that AI is influencing every stage of the research data lifecycle already, not just modeling or statistical analysis. For social scientists, this means new efficiencies, new capabilities, and new responsibilities. Our question to the social scientists in the workshop was how they currently use AI and where they would like to use it in the future. So that's represented in this diagram. So in the discovery, data discovery and planning phase, current uses include conducting rapid literature reviews, explaining research methods or statistical approaches, identifying well-known data sets relevant to a topic, which means that AI can accelerate early stage idea refinement. It can help surface data sets outside your immediate disciplinary silo, and it may reduce time spent on exploratory background work. Future possibilities that people would like to see are data concierge tools that recommend data sets aligned with the research question, more sophisticated synthesis of prior findings, and an AI-supported research design strategy. In the data collection phase, current uses included drafting survey questions and data collection protocols, simulating respondents to test survey logic. We had very lively conversations about that. For social science researchers, some possibilities include that AI can help refine wording for clarity and bias reduction. It can also assist in IRB documentation drafts. Future possibilities that people would like to see are multilingual interview assistance. So when you're conducting an interview, the AI can determine what language that interview should proceed in, and cultural and temporal consistency checking, and more adaptive, responsive survey systems. So for consideration, human expertise is still essential for cultural nuance and ethical integrity. In the data preparation and analysis phase, current uses included writing and cleaning code, optimizing scripts for efficiency, categorizing qualitative data, extracting data from messy or non-standard formats. So this means AI can significantly reduce cleaning time, potentially. It can assist with thematic coding in qualitative research, and it can support working with legacy or poorly structured data. For future possibilities, people wanted to see improved qualitative categorization and improved ability to analyze data sets with different AI models. For consideration, the transparency and reproducibility remain critical. There's a need to document AI-assisted steps clearly throughout the research process. In the publication and sharing phase, current uses include drafting manuscripts and summaries, generating replication code and documentation, which can support clearer documentation and help to translate findings for broader audiences. Future possibilities include automated metadata creation and organization, and we're seeing some of that already. We've got some built into our new platform at ICPSR. Identifying publications that use a given data set, detecting PII or PHI before data sharing. Some considerations and takeaways were be explicit about AI contributions and scholarly outputs, ensure compliance with journal and funder policies. We've already seen cases where researchers used AI and it triggered journal ethics reviews. Not good. Very difficult situation. In the long-term management of data phase, people are currently using it to convert files to accessible formats and using it to identify barriers to access. Things that people would like to see AI do include digitizing scanned records and identifying mergeable data sets and harmonizable measures. The bottom line is that AI is becoming embedded across the research data lifecycle. And with that, I will now turn the presentation over to David Arnold, who can talk a little bit more about responsible AI.
Awesome, thank you. So when developing policy on how people are using information and their inputs with AI, we've had to think about just all the different kinds of tools that are available with AI, because they're everywhere. It's not just LLMs, it's everything else that Jeanette just described. However, I wanted to give a brief overview of the higher viewpoint of AI and your own information inputs through the lens of LLMs, just to kind of give you a brief overview and something to think about whenever maybe trying to use an AI tool or wanting to try a different AI tool. So what is right for you with the sensitive information that you have, and how sensitive is it? So we're going to walk down a little ladder right quick. And the first thing is there's the public version of AI that everyone knows about, right? There's ChatGPT, there's Claude, there's Gemini, etc. And there's the public versions of them, right? Even the monthly subscription fees, same concept. Your inputs are the product. These companies are using your inputs to train future models. If you have sensitive information of any kind, do not use. It's never appropriate. And just kind of be aware, AI is integrated into way more tools than most people realize, right? Even down to chatbots. Your travel website that you want to plan a vacation on is likely using a chatbot that has AI and will use your data, your conversations. So then there's the public version, but there's also enterprise AI. And these are where your employer contracts with OpenAI or Anthropic or Google for a corporate license, for university license. And this is definitely more secure. Inputs are more secure here. And essentially, the company organization says that they promise not to learn from your inputs. And that's better than the public version. However, within the enterprise model, there are two different kinds. You can go to the next page. That's fine with that. Thank you. Within the enterprise model, you have to determine what permissions you have to share and what is really right for you. So we've got zero training on the left. It's the standard promise where the AI company says, we will not read your inputs to make our model smarter. So the vendor stores your chat history for you. They store your information, your inputs, but they legally agree that they can't look at it, they can't learn from it. And generally, this is safer. This is safer than the public version. However, what you really want to look at is zero retention, which there's normally a setting within the enterprise AI models that you're using. And if you can, you should definitely set it to zero retention. And this is where the company says, we will delete your input immediately when you're finished with your conversation. They delete it immediately after processing the request. And this is somewhat kind of like a walled garden. You are protected by a contract that says, we're deleting this information immediately. It's not going to go anywhere else, not going to lead to anything else. If you log out and log back in, it's like you were never there in the first place. This is a much higher standard than the zero training model, right? So zero retention is something to think about. It's the secure enclave. However, that's pretty safe, but not all information you have it can be trusted with this, because although your inputs are safe, security is never truly in your hands at that point. Because once the organization has the input, the information, they have to send it out to their cloud storage, their cloud servers to process the request. And then at that point, information leaves your building, but is contractually guaranteed to be deleted. There's still a possibility, it's still leaving your hands, that something could happen. Data leaks are very common these days, as we know, we've heard about, it's on the news. Things happen, right? So you're never truly 100% secure. Moving towards the future, we're going to be looking towards true local processing. And that's really going to be the golden standard, just on a broad overview with AI tools. And this is where the AI tools are hosted entirely on your own hardware. This way, if you unplugged your computer, unplugged your servers, your Wi-Fi, disconnected from the internet, everything would still work, right? This information literally never touches the internet. And these are both pretty secure things to think about. Zero retention is definitely a pretty secure way to go. Just depends on what kind of information you have. So here's some zero retention cloud examples. Microsoft Azure, where they're straight from their website, no prompts or results are stored. Things are processed off-site, but deleted instantly. U of M's own Maisie model, per their website, information is collected, but not human reviewed or used to train future AI models. Still, the information is shared with cloud services for offsite processing. And Anthropic Claude, much the same. They actually have their own setting within Enterprise you can go to, and you can change the date that they will store your information for you if you want it to be 30 days, if you want it to be 0 days. With the zero retention model, definitely more secure than having them store it at all, right? So then finally, the golden standard, the future, true local processing. Apple has actually started making their own small NPU chips to put in their phones and their computers that can run LLM models directly on your phone, directly on the computer, so long as the process requested by your input is not too great. If it is greater than what that chip can handle, they will send it off site to the cloud to process. But it's a start. It's the first we've seen of phones being able to handle this type of really higher level LLM AI use. And then we've got Microsoft Copilot. Their new laptops have dedicated NPU chips, which run small LLM models locally. And they can perform tasks without information ever leaving the loop. But the same way as Apple, certain tasks might be sent off to the cloud or for Microsoft to learn from. And then finally, kind of the ultimate golden standard moving forward with AI tools and LLMs, etc., is local open source, DIY processing. This is where your organization, or maybe even you in the future personally, a long time from now, have the computing power to run your own LLM at home. And what I just described earlier, you can unplug the internet and you can still have everything processed that you want to have, and you can learn from the model. This is great. This is great for you because certain information just cannot be shared because you just don't know what's going to happen with it. It's too sensitive. There are rules around this. Obviously, we've got HIPAA, FISMA, that you just cannot share the information for any reason, right? So moving forward into the future, local open source models are definitely going to be the way to go. And hopefully this gives you a broad overview of things to think about when you see a new AI tool and you're like, wow, I really want to use that. That could be helpful for what I'm looking to do. You got to think about how sensitive your information is and where is that information actually going? It's going to the cloud. Is it going to be retained by the organization? These are the different factors that we've had to think about when developing our own AI policy. And with that, Joe, you can tell everyone about the ICPSR policy.
Yeah, thanks, David, for that excellent lead-in. As ICPSR's privacy and security officer, it became apparent that we would need to put something in place to give guidance and set limits on what it's possible to do with our data sets and LLMs. And this is an ongoing activity, which I'll talk about in a moment. But right now, I'll talk to you about how we currently lay this out. For all of our data sets that are under the ICPSR terms of use, we already forbid redistribution of data without ICPSR's permission, meaning you're not allowed to hand it off to another party unless you check with us first. And that's true for public use data sets. And it's even more true for restricted data sets, but it covers the public use ones as well. Another thing you're forbidden to do is to attempt to identify individuals from within the data sets. Obviously, our public use data sets, the disclosure risk is very low because of how we curate the data, remove identifiers and so forth, but you can never be 100% sure in that field. So any data set, you're not allowed to redistribute without our permission. You're not allowed to attempt to identify individuals from within it. For restricted data sets, which are the ones we've identified as having higher disclosure risk, In addition to those things, you also have to isolate the data from the internet in order to protect it from potential theft or other abuse. Go ahead. So our LLM policy reflects that. We didn't really make any new rules. We just explained how our existing rules play out against the relatively new world of LLMs. What we did was we categorized LLMs into three categories. Some of this will look very familiar from what David just presented. The first, type 1, are the ones that retain user provided data. They use it to train the LLM. They use it to do, I don't know what. And it's recently come out that they're retaining a lot more than they initially suggested they were, including full text of queries, right? So they're keeping it for a number of purposes that probably aren't on the surface nefarious, but are a problem for us. Type 2 LLMs are the ones that David was referring to as enterprise. They're licensed under a contract which forbids them to do certain kinds of things with the data, like retain it for any purpose. Type 3 LLMs are LLMs which are isolated within a secure network with no access to the internet. Go ahead. And then we break down what types of ICPSR licensed data you're allowed to use with each of them. All right. With type 1, you can't use any data that's under ICPSR terms of use. Let me just take a quick sidebar here. I keep talking about the terms of use because we actually serve up quite a lot of data in the open ICPSR environment that isn't under our terms of use. So this doesn't apply to it. You have to follow whatever the license for those data sets happens to be. But for the data under our terms of use, none of it can be used in a type 1 LLM. For a type 2 LLM, they're agreeing not to retain or redistribute the data, but it is potentially exposed to the internet. It's out there. Our public use data can be used with type 2 LLMs. With type 3 LLMs, you could, if you can convince us that it's adequately isolated along the lines of our VDE, we could allow you to use restricted data within it. We do have a security plan for restricted data that allows you to stand up your own VDE, take secure download data from ICPSR and put it in there. If you also have an LLM in there that is isolated within that environment, can't talk out, then that's a type 3, and you could use that with restricted data. In all cases, you need to get our permission to do it. We're still sort of tracking uses with LLMs, so we do want to know and we do want to look at and have the opportunity to approve each case. Also, attempts to identify individuals are still forbidden. And we're really twitchy about that in the LLM environment because LLMs, especially if they have access to other data sets to bump up against it, will have better abilities to potentially pull individuals out of a data set than a human would. For restricted use data sets, output also has to be vetted prior to removal from the safe environment. In the context of LLMs, that's proving to be a very interesting topic. Could you go one forward? All right. Some additional comments. Our study level metadata is public use, but it's under a CC BY license, which requires that we get credited for it. Do CC BY licenses work with LLMs? I guess we can talk about it. But because it's not under ICPSR's terms of use, you can use it with one. In consultation with the Data Stewardship Policy Committee, make decisions about application of the policy. The most important thing I want to say now that we've summarized it, real quick, if you want to see our policy, I've sort of paraphrased it in the past 2 slides, but if you want to actually go look at it, go onto the ICPSR website and search for LLM policy. Honestly, in testing, I and others have been able to just go into a web browser and type ICPSR space LLM, and we get our LLM policy. So that may be an even easier route. But look, we've had this policy since late 2024. In that time, the environment around the use of AI with data has evolved. People have new and exciting things they want to do with it. And we now have AIs that have options like turn off use of data for training, turn off retention of data, and so on. And potentially LLMs that require less compute power, making it easier potentially to host one inside a virtual desktop infrastructure. I don't think we're quite there yet with our own VDE, simply because the current VDE virtual machines don't have a GPU. If you don't know what any of that meant, don't worry about it. Follow up later if you want to talk about it. But we are looking toward the potential to be able to host our own AIs of various sorts. When we get to the Q&A session, I want you to know we are actively reviewing our current policy and what it should look like in future. For example, how should we handle situations where you can set zero retention or zero training, right? Does that make it a type 2? That sort of thing. And everybody else on this presentation is part of that committee. So when we get to the Q&A part, if you have any input you want to give us on what you'd like to see us address in the policy or things you want to do or ways we can make your research life easier, please bring them out then, and we're excited to hear. The timing for us is great. Thank you. Now I hand off to Alap.
Thanks, Joe.
Oh, whoops. Sorry, Alap, my bad.
Yeah.
This slide isn't just about LLMs, but I was asked to include it when we did this before, so I'm going to do it now. It's relevant to LLMs because some of you may have already used data in them in ways that aren't consistent with our policy. And if so, let's talk about it. If you violated the ICPSR terms of use, come to us, talk to us. We're not necessarily mad about it. We want to fix the problem, right? If you think you violated the terms of use for public use data, contact user support, which is help at icpsr.umich.edu. If you think you might have violated a restricted data use agreement or data security plan, talk to the project manager that you worked with to get access to the data. Do these things right away, all right? Everybody makes mistakes. What matters is how you respond to them. And a really important factor in that response is speed. So if you've messed up, tell us, we'll work with you, we'll figure it out, and we'll get everybody back to an equilibrium and keep doing what we're supposed to be doing. All right, thank you. Now I hand to Alap. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Joe. No, that was a really important note. So we thought that we would also talk about how AI is affecting how we do our business here at ICPSR. As a long-standing archive, there are so many places that AI has the potential to have an impact, and we thought we'd touch on a few of them. But as Jeanette said earlier, there are a lot of places in the research data pipeline that could have potential for AI to impact. And it's so early in the game now that it's really important to figure out what is the right space to bring AI in, and what is sort of places where AI should not be a part of our data pipeline. And that is our number one consideration. We have other considerations too, in terms of what users expect to be able to do with AI. And that's why, as Joe said, if you have scenarios or suggestions that you would share with us, that would be really helpful for us as we think about AI. We also often think about when to be a first mover in this space and when to wait it out and see how things play out. There are advantages to both, and we have to be very thoughtful as an archive on when we choose which approach. All of that is underlying by our sort of big question, which is how do we use AI responsibly? We know it's out there. It definitely has a lot of benefits, and as you just heard, it has a lot of risks. And it's really important that we figure out, as one of the foremost archives in the social science space, how do we use AI responsibly? And so these are all the things we are constantly thinking about. And to that end, the next few slides present some of the projects we are taking on right now, some experiments that we have in progress, and some future work that we have planned. So Turbo Curator is a tool that we have available today. It's available as a plugin to Dataverse, as well as it is available on our new platform that most of our data will be migrating to soon. The tool allows depositors to use AI to enhance their metadata. It doesn't look at our data. As David and Joe both mentioned earlier, we don't want to share our data with third-party AI providers. But there is a lot of benefit in if somebody wants to, in improving the metadata that is being submitted to us. So that's what Turbo Curator helps us do. And it's been a great project because it's giving us real-time feedback in terms of what AI should be and what it shouldn't be. By the end of this year, we should also have a secure cloud environment where researchers can run AI models with sensitive data. This is part of our RDE research development ecosystem grant that Jeanette is the managing director for. It's been a really challenging problem to find and build a cloud environment with enough computing power to be useful for the kinds of data that we have. And then finally, also by the end of this year, we are trying to build a way in which we as ICPSR can communicate with and interact directly with the different models that are out there through something that's called as the Model Context Protocol. This protocol came up last year and has really taken on a life of its own because it allows systems to talk to each other. And instead of the AI just crawling all of our websites and taking in information at its own accord, we have more control over what we can give to the AI and when we give it. And so that's a project that we have ongoing right now as well. Then that, if you can get us to the next slide. Thank you. In terms of exploring some of the considerations we laid out before, we are also running a lot of experiments. Some of these experiments are projects we're running internally. Some are projects where we have partners at the University of Michigan. And in some cases, we actually have partners from very many different disciplines, including engineering and computational sciences. And so I'll just go through a couple of these experiments to help you understand sort of the work that we are doing here to unpack what AI can do. Some of you might have heard that ICPSR is heavily involved with rescuing data, especially from federal websites that might be useful for future researchers. And one of the big problems with that is we crowdsource that approach, and oftentimes we end up with data submissions that have overlapping data sets. By that I mean many contributors will submit the same data set, and then it's really hard for us to deduplicate what it is and describe that data. And that's sort of one place where we are checking to see if AI could be useful. In the same way, enriching the very, very sparse metadata we often get with deposits, especially in Data Lumos, which is where a lot of our rescue data lives. That is also really helpful. We have all this data, but it's not very useful unless it's described very well. And AI in some ways could be helpful in that. And we're running experiments to see if that really could help. If you've ever gone to OpenICPSR, it's not a very easy way to discover the data that's in there or to even explore what's in there. You have to download each file and see what's in it because it's not described very well. The file structures are different for each of the different projects. And we are trying to see if AI could help in either of those accords. I'll talk about also the research assistant project, which is where we are using AI to examine if different waves of longitudinal data sets can be harmonized. We have plenty of data sets here that are long running, and oftentimes the variables in those data sets change over time, and it's very, very hard to figure out what changed and when it changed. But it turns out that AI actually can help in that space. And so we have a project right now where we're working with ISR and the School of Engineering here on campus to see if we can make this kind of an AI tool available for the long term. And that, you can go to the next slide, please. While we are doing these experiments, we're also starting to form a view of what our future work should be. As you heard from David and Joe, our safest bet to use AI responsibly is to not have it leave our building, metaphorically speaking. And to make that happen, we really need to have the ability to host private LLMs or SLMs. Joe was or David, I think, was talking about language models that could run on your phone, and those are really small language models, different from like what ChatGPT has, which needs multiple computers to run. So we're really interested in how can we set up an infrastructure to run our own LLM in-house securely, so that we can use it with our data. We're also starting to see an uptick in users searching for data through ChatGPT. It was always Google that's sort of the number one way people search for things, but slowly ChatGPT is creeping up, and part of our question is how can we have an AI native search that will enable better discovery? Can we create ways in which users can talk to our data through chatbots? So instead of going to a variables page and looking at all the variables, can you just ask questions of that data and sort of get a sense for what's inside the data by talking to the data? That's another area of future work for us. We always are trying to think about ways in which to make our homepages, our study homepages, a place that that users can use to start to analyze some of the data, and that's where the work around additional notebook types comes in. So all of that to say that we are being careful and thoughtful about how we use AI in doing our business here at ICPSR, and we are really trying to experiment to understand the contours of what it means to be responsible with all these new technologies that are coming at us. With that, I will ask if there are any questions. Q&A. So
there was one question that was put into the Q&A box, and we can start with that. And I would remind people, if you have questions or reactions to the ICPSR policy, or what you would like to be doing with AI that the policy doesn't allow, things like that, we would love that kind of input. So go ahead and put that in the Q&A box or in the chat. There was a question that just came to the hosts and panelists in the chat that's easy to answer, which is, will you get the slides? Yes, this session is being recorded, and the recording and the slides will show up in the ICPSR's YouTube data fair playlist. Sometimes it takes about a week to get up there because we do go through the captions and make sure that they're correct, things like that. So you will have access to this probably within about a week. And I will go ahead and ask the question that was in the Q&A. Oh, there's two questions. We'll start with the first one. With AI in mind, there seems to be an idea trending that data sharing and related management should be happening faster. Tools being built to utilize AI and data analysis should be happening faster. How do you or would you respond to this kind of statement from a sponsor or a PI? I'm assuming this is someone hypothetically giving us data and saying, why does it take so long to get the data out? And then the person asking the question said to answer it with the breadth and depth of ICPSR's holding and usage in mind. I will throw that out there to the panelists and see who wants to grab it.
I can take a first pass, Lynette. That is a great question. I think from my perspective, the backbone of any AI technology is the data. And I think now, more than ever before, it's really important to be careful and meticulous with the metadata and the data that we are handling. So there's definitely, I can definitely understand the perception of trying to be faster with what we do. But I think the volume of impact that is now possible because of AI is also the reason for us to be much more careful with what we do. And that's kind of my statement. We've realized that we can do some things faster, but we've also realized that we have to do some things much more carefully now, just because of what AI can do. So Joe, I'll pass it to you.
Building on what Alap said, the AI companies right now are very much in a mode of move fast, break things, accelerating growth, figure it all out as we go, which is, it's a large part of startup culture, not just in the US, but elsewhere, though primarily here. And when you're in the business of being responsible long-term stewards of data about research subjects, about populations, about people, about communities, move fast, break things, and pick up the pieces later is not an appropriate way for us to approach things. So by definition, we're in a very different human endeavor than the AI companies are. And our primary responsibility is to the people our data describes and the people who provided it to us and the research community to maintain trust so researchers can continue to get very personal data. So are we going to lag a bit? Yeah, because our responsibility is to protect the data and the people within it. And their responsibility is to drive higher profits every quarter and return shareholder value. So we're in a different place and we have to be cautious. Thanks.
The person who asked the question actually clarified, which fits a little bit with what Joe was just saying. They said, I meant more like, is ICPSR being compared to other agencies that might be smaller or have less scale of data and metadata when they're thinking about AI?
Yeah, thank you so much for the clarification. I was just going to respond to that. Joe, I'm sorry if I interrupted you.
No, you're fine.
I think from our perspective, there are definitely some moments in time where the connotation is, why does it take so long? So some other agencies might be doing it faster, or I know from my team specifically, I lead a team of about 60 IT people, and oftentimes, or sometimes the question is, with AI writing all the code for us, why does it take so long to do some of the things that we do? And I think we fall back again to what Joe was saying, which is that our posture is to be a very careful, responsible organization, and as such, we appreciate what AI can do, but we are also constructive skeptics. I'll say it in that way.
Yeah, I want to build on what Alip says. We want to make it possible for all of you and for the rest of the research community to use the most effective tools available to work with our data. But we have to do it in a way that maintains our responsible stewardship of the data. We're after the same endpoint you are. There's nothing I want more than for you to be able to use powerful AI tools. We just have to do it in a way that is consistent with our data protection obligations. But we want to get the same place you do.
Great, thanks for answering those. One more question popped in, which is, can anyone just download the data published by ICPSR that is not restricted? And I can actually take the first answer at this. The answer is that you have to log in before you can download the data, but much of ICPSR's data is freely available to anyone. Those are the data that are curated by funds from federal agencies or research foundations, things like that, that fund our topical archives. Those data sets are downloadable by anybody with a login, as long as it's the public use data. For a big chunk of our data, it's published or it's curated with member funds. So the organizations that are members of ICPSR pay an annual fee to be members, and that fee is used in part to curate data that is then available for free to people at those member institutions. So sometimes there is that second check to make sure that you're at a member institution. If somebody wanted members only data but is not at a member institution, they can pay for the data. But it's not quite as easy as just going and downloading it right from the website.
And even if you can download it, it's still under whatever terms of use it's under.
And that actually goes to the next question that just popped in, which is,
Oh.
if it's freely available to anyone, how do you ensure that they don't feed the data to ChatGPT?
I sounded very forgiving when I talked about violations of our policies earlier, but forgiveness is about slight mistakes, not someone gaining access under false pretenses and feeding our data wholesale to ChatGPT. This is Love Data Week, so we're positive, we're happy. This probably isn't the time for me to go into the fact that we can and will deny access to individuals or institutions potentially forever for abuse of data that we provide. But we can and we will. It's not the mode I like to be in. How do we go about vetting private LLMs? A question from Michael Kirkwood. It's a great question, and it's one that we're trying to figure out ourselves at this point. We do actually have an active request. I don't want to say anything more about it to protect the identity of the requester, but we do have an active request to use an LLM with some of our data, either in our environment, which may or may not work, given the compute power available in our virtual desktops, or in their environment. With respect to our environment, we have our technical folks who are familiar look at information about the chosen software and see what we can figure out. And we also know how the boundaries of our environment work, right? If it's going to be in someone else's environment, we would obviously vet the LLM software. We would ask them a lot of very detailed questions about their virtual desktop environment, how isolated it is, what technologies they're using. But ultimately, it's going to be a challenge. I mean, it's new, right? And we're working on it. I'll add, by the way, that at least if it's in our own environment, we get to vet the output. We get to look at what comes out. If it's in someone else's environment, we have to trust them to do it according to our standards. And that all sounds really well and good, but one of the challenges we're facing is people who use LLMs against data will want to pull out output that is different from the types of output we traditionally vet. Data and stuff like that for research papers is one thing, but when someone says, we want to improve the model, we want to pull out insights, all of a sudden our output vetting capability needs to ramp up. We need to do a lot of learning and figure out how to do this. Output vetting outside of in the quantitative environment, I might get lambasted for this. In the quantitative environment, output vetting is relatively easy. In the qualitative environment where it's free text, output vetting suddenly becomes a lot more complex. There are ways to identify people without saying a traditional direct identifier. But in the new LLM environment, none of us have done this before. So we're looking to find people who have. We're doing a lot of learning. As we reform our LLM AI policy, we also have to figure out the output vetting aspects of it. So thank you, Michael, for a question that I took in directions you probably hadn't intended. But I hope I also answered your question, which is, we're figuring it out. Thanks. It's a good question.
And that ends the questions that we have so far. Oh, one more just popped in. I worry if someone started using this data for research but is doing vibe coding, this might get leaked.
Yeah, we worry about that too. And that's
I think that goes with what you were just talking about.
Are we not supposed to do vibe coding with this data? Sure, but make sure you're using an LLM that doesn't retain it. And seriously, talk to us about this, all right? This is the kind of conversation we need to have with our user community as part of the revisualization of the LLM policy.
You know, we need more data points on how people are using this information. And you know, the policy is what it is, but this is an ever evolving, you know, area where like things are going to be so clear 10 years from now when we look back and are like, oh, everyone should have taken this path. But right now in the present moment, people are trying their best to navigate this whole new world. So we need the data points to know. It's going to help us to learn if people are making mistakes without knowing in that moment. Come to us, talk to us, let us get our data points so it evolves our policy moving forward.
So these extremely on-point questions about vibe coding are coming from an anonymous attendee, which is totally fine. But I would like to talk to you further about this, so please reach out to us so that we can continue the conversation and work together to do this in a safe way. You're the first person to come to me and use the phrase vibe coding with respect to our data. I know what it means, but you're not going to be the last, and you probably won't be the last this week, based on how active our community is. So come talk to us if you don't mind. I respect anonymity, but I want to talk about this.
And with that, we've reached the end of our time together. We'd like to thank you all for joining us and to thank David, Joe, Jeanette, and Alap for their time and expertise. Thank you all again for spending this hour with us, and enjoy the rest of your Love Data Week.